Hello, and welcome to Recapping with Delora
and Ashley.
Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Recapping Podcast.
Also, rate, review, and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the things.
We want to hear your thoughts on the movies and shows we review.
Leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or our YouTube channel, and we will read them during the show.
Or reach out to us on social media. We love talking all things entertainment and pop culture with you.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you.
All right. We are back with another In Conversation. Delora, we're rolling through these in 2024, aren't we?
Yes, we are. And I love every single one of them. They're like my children. I love them equally, you know?
Absolutely. We love having these conversations with industry insiders, as we call them. And today is a little extra special for me because it's with family. I get a chance to bring on my cousin, Daresha Kyi. Welcome to the podcast, Daresha.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for joining us. We will hop right in and start us off as we usually do with asking you to walk us and our listeners through the highlights of your journey as a graduate of NYU Film School and an award-winning director, producer, and writer.
Well, where do I begin? Shall I begin at the beginning?
Please do.
So originally my goal as a kid was to be an actress because I was that kid in the back of the class running her mouth 24/7. I was that straight A student who the only thing I ever got in trouble mostly for was talking. And that was because I was a storyteller. I loved telling stories. And that led to becoming a performer, becoming an actor, singer, dancer. Well, not a really good dancer, a good freestyle, but choreography is really not my forte. But anyway, so
no boom cats.
No, honey, no. You know, I'm that girl who everybody went left, I went right and crashed into everybody. That would be me. But anyway, so that led me to do a lot of theater and plays in school, plays at community theater, and I was very passionate about acting. I went to acting school and then wound up going to college to study acting. But in the summer of my freshman year, like after the year ended, between freshman and sophomore years, I got hired by an independent documentary filmmaker. This is in New York City. I was living in New York, and he was a very lovely man. His name is Billy Sorokin, and he was very talented, but he was also very smart in that he saw me, he saw what I was capable of, and he just turned me loose. So I helped him with the documentary he was making at the time about rent in the Bronx. And I did archival research. I went down into dusty basements and dug through things. I helped him write grant proposals. I went on every shoot with him and was an assistant camera, assistant sound, whatever he needed, I was there. And by the end of that summer, where I had originally been bitten by the acting bug, I was now bitten by the filmmaking bug. And so I actually wound up dropping out of college and working in the independent film community of New York at the time. So this would have been in the early 80s when there was a burgeoning Black independent film community. This is when Spike Lee was there, and that's when She's Gotta Have It came out. And it was just a really, 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 it was very fruitful, very busy, very, full time of a lot of people doing a lot of good things. And I got to work on a lot of projects, partially because I was willing to do anything and because I just wanted to learn. So I was an assistant camera, I was an assistant editor, I was a grants administrator. I worked at a company that handed out rented equipment, like whatever was film related, I wanted to know. I was kind of like doing my own crash course study of the industry because I was trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to do within the industry. And I finally decided what I wanted to do is direct because I'm a bossy little thing. So, so that was like, okay, I think I want to direct. So
a natural leader for sure.
That's a nicer way to put it, but I like BLT. Doing all that work, working at the Film Fund, which is where I was a grants administrator, reading grant applications, and sitting in the room with the panels as they deliberated about who's going to get funding and who's not going to get funding. I learned what it took to be an independent filmmaker in that particular route, which was how do you need to be able to write a grant proposal, you need to be able to, and you must have a work sample. So if you want to get, because that's one of the catch-22s that people don't realize is in order to get work, you have to have work. In order to get money from a funder, you need a work sample.
Right.
And so people spend money just trying to get money, right? But anyway, so I realized what I needed if I wanted to become a filmmaker was I needed to have a work sample. So, and I also needed to finish my degree because if I didn't, my mom was going to kill me. And I'm the type of person, I just wanted that degree, So I decided, okay, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to go to film school. So I applied and was accepted at NYU, went to NYU because my plan was I'll get my degree. And because I have access to equipment and crews and stuff, I'll be able to make that sample film. Right. That will be my senior project. And so that's what I did. I used that film to get my first grant from the New York State Council on the Arts to make my next film and other foundations. I think I got the Jerome Foundation and a couple other ones, but I started getting money to make a film. And so I was able to then do another narrative film. So this is all narrative. This was not documentary film. This is all narrative film. The first film that I made at school was called The Thinnest Line, and that was a story about friendship and jealousy. And that film I used to raise the money for Land Where My Fathers Died, which I wrote, produced, directed, and starred in.
Did you sleep? It doesn't sound like you slept much during this era.
Well, we shot it over 2 weekends because it's a short film. So yeah, I slept. It wasn't, it's a short film, so it's a short script. So it's all
manageable,
contained, much more manageable. Yeah. But that film, which also starred a up and coming young actor who'd never done a film before named Isaiah Washington. He was my co-star. And that film did really well. That film actually won me a fellowship to go to AFI. They had started this nationwide search for people of color to go to AFI to sort of try to bring more color into the industry. And so there was one slot for each of the positions or each of the fields of study at AFI. They have directing, producing, editing, camera person, costume, and set design. So 6 people. So 6 people got chosen, and I was chosen for the director slot. And so I went to AFI because of Land Where My Fathers Died. It did really well. It was a big splash. But that experience was very traumatic for me. And it actually made me stop making movies for 30 years.
Wow. The AFI experience was traumatic?
It was deeply traumatic. One of the things they do is so it's very competitive. You have to be invited back the second year. And they whittle it down so more than half of the first year does not come back. First year people don't come back. And so when you do your projects, you screen the project for the entire community, the teachers and students and administration or whoever's there. And then you and your whole team go up on stage, face the audience, and the audience gives you feedback and criticism, but you're not allowed to respond at all. You're not allowed to say anything, which is slightly hard under any circumstances, but especially from a group of people who are all vying for your slot. And I had a car accident when I was returning the equipment from the last day of the shoot and was laid out and couldn't move, literally could not walk for 2 days. And the biggest mistake I made was that I did not tell the administration what had happened to me, because I had been this wonder kid who'd always been able to pull through. And so I thought I would just pull through. I couldn't pull through that. I lost 2 days of editing, So that experience sitting on that stage was humiliating because we didn't really get to finish the project. And I, of course, didn't get invited back. And I left LA so I came to LA in a bunch of fair. And so, like there was a big party and Danny Glover was there and Forrest Whitaker was there. All these, Holly Black A-list people were there. And I left with my tail tucked between my legs. Deeply traumatized. And I actually didn't realize how traumatized I was. I didn't use that language at all until recently. Thinking back over my career and my life, I realized that I was very traumatized because I just didn't do another film. I tried to get some films off the ground, but it was next to impossible. Or I would get them and not finish. It was just a really hard time. And to make ends meet, I started working in television, and so that juggling act of, survival versus creativity came into play as well. So, and I got married and my husband had 2 kids and I started raising 2 kids. So my priority shifted to, I need to make a living. So that's how I got into working in television because it was much more stable. Right. And I'll make movies on the side. Not. So yeah, there was a long gap before I came back to filmmaking. Now, in that time, I did a lot of projects and I made a lot of television shows and episodes and segments and was a film producer, was a segment producer, was a show producer, was a series producer, was all kinds. I created all kinds of content, some of which I am proud of and some of which I hope never sees the light of day again. But, it was work. And so I was working. During that time, I produced other people's films, and that was great and that was fun. But I didn't produce any of my own work until 2015. I started working with a friend of mine. She was a friend at the time who wanted to make a film. And basically, long story short, I wound up co-directing that film. And that's Chavela. I wound up co-directing Chavela. And that film was what they call the comeback for me, because that film did exceptionally well. It was screened in over 43 countries. It got distribution, it got theatrical release, it tore up the festival circuit. And all of a sudden, my name was on people's lips again, and I was a filmmaker again. So I realized at the time that I needed to capitalize as quickly as possible on the success that the film was having. Chavela came out in 2017, and I was like, I got to come up with another idea for another film right now. And that's how I came across the story of the Mama Bears. So Chavela came out in the Berlin Film Festival in February of 2017, and I was shooting Mama Bears by May of 2017. So after that, I did the short with Kimberly and Kai. That won an Emmy. So then I was really back. And so that's how I became a filmmaker.
Wow. Well, I am really sorry to hear about the traumatic experience with AFI, for sure. But so glad that that passion did not truly leave you and that inspiration never really left you, even if it took you time in your journey to really get back to it in the way that you wanted to.
Yes. And sometimes it takes distance from a situation and exposures to terminology. Ashley and I talk about this all the time. We feel like we're in the generation where we're able to put words to things that our families, like our parents and our grandparents, didn't have terms to. And when you're able to call a thing, you're then able to heal from it, right? And I think that was powerful. Thank you for sharing your story.
Sure.
So you talked a little bit about this experience being in New York and really, finding your footing when you first got there with getting into the film industry, switching from acting to directing and all these various things. But you now lived in like the 3 major, in my opinion, creative meccas of the US, right? You lived in New York, you lived in LA, and now in Atlanta. So what is your take on those experiences and like any preference for opportunities in your creative life?
So let me say that I was born in LA. I didn't grow up there. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, but I was born there. We lived there until I was 9 months old, and then we moved back to Dayton. So LA has always been a part of my life. I've been in and out of LA a few times. And same thing with New York, because part of our family has all been based in New York on my mother's side. And I would go up there. At one point, we tried to live there when I was a little girl. It didn't work out. We had wound up moving back to Dayton, but I have a long histories with both of those cities. Atlanta is new to me. I was afraid of the South for many years for all the reasons we know. I don't think I even need to go into those, right?
Yep.
So I didn't know what a Black Mecca Atlanta was. I guess I heard about it, but I was just like, yeah, whatever. So I think that all three cities are amazing places. And I think that for me, New York is where I feel like I grew up, because I got there when I was 18, and you ain't grown at 18, you know?
Correct.
And I had so many transformative experiences living in New York. I really feel like that's where I grew up, like, you know, because that's the only place I've ever been mugged. It's the only place I've ever been, like, just
Guess that's when you're a true New Yorker.
fight, you know, like, yeah, right. So it brought out the beast in me, and I loved New York. I loved living there. I loved the energy and the fast pace of it. How you meet people all the time, you know, you just step out your house and you're gonna meet somebody. You ain't got to go nowhere. You ain't got to do nothing, right? So it was perfect for me coming up. It was perfect for me. I lived there off and on for over 30 years. So I have a very passionate love-hate relationship with New York. I think it's great for filmmaking. I mean, it's such an interesting city, you know. These days, it's changed so much and it's gotten so commercialized and gentrified that, you know, it's very different than when I moved there in the early 80s, in 1980. You know, that was still the old Times Square that was dangerous, that was scary. That now it's Disneyland.
Right.
Literally.
All the tourists.
Yeah, it is Disneyland.
I was there last year, and yes, I can concur.
It's owned by Disney. A lot of it is just literally owned by Disney.
That's true.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that I like New York for young filmmakers just because there's such a strong community there. That's if you're independent. But now if you want to go to Hollywood, you need to go to LA. If you want to be in Hollywood, right? You need to be in Hollywood. So that's the other thing but for me, LA is not a good fit energetically. It doesn't work for me. Like, I go out there and I don't do well. I thrive in New York, but I do not thrive in LA. But I'm thriving here in Atlanta. Now, the reasons that I don't thrive in LA, I don't really know. I just feel like, you know, there's this thing called astrocartography, which is basically where they match your natal horoscope with the natal horoscope of the city that you want to know.
Oh, yes.
And it tells you what your relationship is. And I have a lot of problems in LA.
I've never heard of this.
Astrocartography. Check it out. That's very
fascinating.
Yeah.
We dibble and dabble in the zodiac signs. It's a very basic understanding.
Because I've never had like my charts read or any of that. I don't even know what my like rising is or any of those things. It's fun
easy
though
to find out. You can Google it. I mean, you can go online. There's a bunch of sites where you can just plug in your date of birth, if they need the date, the time, and the location. That's it. And it will create your natal chart.
Okay.
And usually they will interpret it as well, you know.
And what's also fascinating about the chart is you have to state which hemisphere you're in, because we see the stars differently, right? From the southern hemisphere.
From wherever you are on the planet.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I'll have to look that up. Takeaway for me from this episode. But that's interesting to hear about your perspective, especially the shifts that have happened in these cities over time, because I think Atlanta to me is becoming more and more a place that it seems like creatives are migrating because the opportunities are there. So I love the fact that you're there and you can speak a little bit to the fact that you feel like you're thriving in that environment. Because for me, Atlanta is just a Black Mecca, right? So I just love the fact that when I come, I get to see Black people in many walks of life living their best lives, right? So
like I was talking to a friend about some event we were going to. We were talking about people and the money and who's going to be there and blah, blah, blah. And my friend turned to me and says, "Girl, you know, this is Atlanta. Ratchet people got money too."
Yeah, if you've been to an Atlanta brunch, you know that for damn sure.
Everybody
funny.
here, everybody.
So, being based in Atlanta, what did you learn that you didn't know while filming Battleground, Georgia?
Battleground, Georgia is a work for hire piece that MSNBC Films hired me to direct. And it's about voter suppression, and it's about the grassroots organizers in Atlanta who helped flip the state and the backlash that they faced. And from following these people, you learn a lot about what it takes to flip a state.
Yes.
It is no joke. I have nothing but
Yes.
respect for grassroots organizers who do this work because it ain't easy, it's nonstop, and it's 365. And
Mhm.
so what I learned is, and there's a lot of risk involved still, you know, more than I dreamed, more than I dreamed. I mean, this was not on Battleground, Georgia, but I also am in the process of making a documentary about one of the groups that are in Battleground, Georgia, which is Black Voters Matter Fund.
Yes.
And we spent 7 months filming with them in 2020 and early 2021. And that was the first time I ever had to hire a security detail because the
Wow.
threats were real. And I realized at a certain point, the first night in Cleveland, Ohio, somebody set fire to their Airbnb.
What?
Girls. I'm telling you, it's real. And so after that day, you know, I realized, well, they have security. And I'm wherever they are, I'm there, like 2 feet away, and sometimes right beside them. So if somebody comes for them, I'm in the way. I need my own security.
Absolutely. Haven't they said like domestic terrorism is our biggest threat to national security at the moment? So
I learned that it's still dangerous in 2024. No, I learned a lot about. There's a woman, a professor at Emory named Carol Anderson, who was just simply brilliant. And I did I did 2 interviews with her. And she taught me a lot about the history of like how Jim Crow laws spread and how she was able to connect the dots between what happened in 2020 and what happened in 18, whatever, right? Like, for example, she's like, the big lie, right? The big lie is an old lie.
Yes.
And that is the lie that started after Reconstruction. When Black people got the vote, suddenly there was fraud. There was, you know, election fraud. But the election fraud, and there was election fraud, but it was the white people who were committing election fraud because they didn't want the Black vote to be counted, right? But they flipped it and said it was us.
Right.
So she was able for me to connect those dots between the past and the present and show me how the past is still alive in the present.
Man, there is nothing new under the sun.
Well, there is, but that ain't it.
Doing such important work too within this political year that we're going through, and with so much misinformation that gets spread now, and the desire for people to try to stop kids from learning actual history and information. It's going to be so much more vital as we move forward for there to be projects like yours that protect and provide the truth. You've worked on projects as we've been talking about here, right? Mama Bears, Chavella, Battleground, Georgia. What have you enjoyed among the many in terms of your subject matter or your experience?
Well, one of the things that I enjoy, that I love about filmmaking is meeting people, you know. I consider it the highest honor for someone to trust you with their story. It is, I don't take it lightly. I don't take it for granted. I think that, you know, it is precious. And I have nothing but respect for people who are willing to let you follow them around for however long it takes, for years, right? For years. I'm calling you. What you got going on? Where you doing? What you going? Okay, can we come? Can we come? Can we come? Okay, I got the crew. We'll meet you there at this time. Like, I don't know that they know what they're getting into when they sign up to be part of a film, but it is a commitment. It is a hell of a commitment, and they have to keep recommitting to it. And I think part of what I've been blessed with is an ability to connect with people on a very deep level and to understand many different types of people and to be able to reach across the aisle, as they say, right? So, for example, with Mama Bears, these are conservative Christian mothers. I'm not even Christian. Let's start there. They were, it was very important to me to have a Black mom in the film. But the other moms were white, right? So they're conservative Christian, they're white women from the South. Like I told you, I was afraid of the South.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're just people, right? At the end of the day, they're just people, and they have these incredible stories. And they honored me by not caring that I was a Christian, because what I said to them is, I want to share your story with the world because I think you're heroic. That kind of transformation that they undergo, going from evangelical Christian to fully affirming LGBTQ plus ally and advocate, is no small feat. And it is not for the weak. It is dark. You have to go through the dark night of the soul, right? You have to examine everything that you ever believed and that you were taught by your grandparents, by your aunts and uncles, right? And you may lose all of them.
Yeah.
You may, as Kimberly Shapley, she lost her whole family. She came from a clan, okay? She came from a clan, just many
not
people.
The Ku Klux, but a clan.
A family, family clan, and so your question was, what did I learn or what did I enjoy? I think you asked me what I enjoyed.
What you enjoyed, because again, yes. There's been a variety, right, of topics that you've had the opportunity to cover. So just what did you enjoy most about it? Not even most, but just among your different experiences.
What I enjoy is just getting to know people and getting to develop relationships with them and for life, And the actual process of filmmaking is excruciating, but but I love it. It's like a bad relationship.
Oh boy. Okay.
Listen, but by the time I finished Mama Bears, that 5 years, so 5 years of my life to make that film. It took 5 years to raise the money, to shoot it, to edit it, to get all of the elements to make that movie. And when it was done, it was such a heavy lift that I felt like I had been run over by a Mack truck. And people kept saying, "Oh my God, this is so exciting. You're at South by and Della, and how do you feel?" And I was like, I feel like elated roadkill. That's how I feel, right? So yeah, that's what I mean. It's hard. It's really hard.
That's honest. You love it, but
it is. Everyone talks about sweat equity all the time, and it's like it's real. It's even more than that, more than just sweat, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I love it, but it's funny because today I was reading a report that was just done about the documentary film. It's about documentary filmmakers and mental health, and it is not a good picture. I'm gonna send it to you so y'all can see.
Please do.
You said documentary because there's the actor from I believe Titanic, saying that there should be some type of compensation for the trauma that they go through as actors. But you're saying this is for documentary
filmmakers. Yeah. It's just about how hard it is.
Yeah, I was just going to say, too, please send it over because we just talked about a documentary on one of our last recaps, the one that deals with the Shekinah church. And then we just talked about how we like cult documentaries. And I feel like that has to be a heavy emotional burden.
Yeah, it is. It's a few things and it's more than a notion. So I'll just read you a couple of highlights that are just like kind of devastating. In the documentary industry, there is not enough funding for the number of films that are being made. The lack of funding creates scarcity and financial precarity, as well as power imbalances between creators and funders. Filmmakers agree that the industry as it currently exists has been built for people with independent wealth, and it works better for able-bodied white men without caregiving responsibilities. Though many people without independent wealth are now making documentaries, the path through the industry is still a great deal easier with the support and stability of intergenerational wealth or a partner with a regular income. You see colleagues and they seem to be absolutely fine, and then you find out their parents bought them a house or they've got an inheritance. All right, so that's one thing, is like, just sort of like underlying the whole system, right?
Yeah.
But experienced filmmakers describe being pushed to make decisions that they viewed as unethical exploitations of trauma for commercial appeal. One director shared, "My distributor said to me, 'We really love your approach, but could you just change it? Could you make it more like Icarus or a crime film?'" Just, I don't know. The job
Financial.
insecurity, the
Yeah.
pressure. And then there's this one. This is the one that got me. The pressures of success. Filmmakers discussed how exhausted they feel in an industry that equates productivity and visibility to success. One director shared, "I'm coming out of a year and a half of hell that I needed to be medicated to get through. On the outside, I look like I'm doing really well. I've released so many hours of content. But personally, financially, and for my mental health, it's been at a huge cost." Sobering.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
Thank you for sharing that. You definitely have to share with us more info so we can check it out and possibly bring it back and talk about it a little bit more on the mic.
Absolutely. And what I was referring to was Billy Zane. He was in Titanic, and he talked about how actors should receive emotional stunt pay for traumatic roles. He says the body registers it.
That's real. Yeah.
That is real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the body registers it as real. Like the body and the subconscious don't know the difference between reality and pretend.
Yep.
There is no pretend for your subconscious. So you get that shock, that impact, you're going to feel it. And it's going to be held in the body. Yeah, I think he's right. But I mean, even that, so you get paid for it, but still you got to go through it. And now you've got these wounds, this pain that you're carrying and whatever. It's not, more to the point, I think, would be to have therapy for people, included in the budget. Like you have an on-site therapist, and you need to have access to continued therapy after it is over.
I think Ariana Grande just talked about that on a podcast about how there needs to be mandatory therapy sessions for everybody who works in the industry. So
Yep.
Your remarkable films, Mama Bears and Battleground Georgia, are political in nature. What is your through line in messaging for these works? And who's your audience? And does it change from project to project?
Yes, it changes from project to project. Mama Bears was made for the LGBTQ plus and Christian communities so that we could build bridges between them. Battleground Georgia is for all of us who care about democracy. Chavella, I initially thought we were making it for the queer community as well. But when it came out, I found out based on the audience that it was for everybody, because people, like, I would go to do a Q&A after that film. And so the Q&A is like 20 minutes, half an hour. So you've had the whole movie, then you had the time to set up the Q&A, the whole Q&A, and people would come up to me still weeping. Straight men would come up to me weeping about how that film had moved them. And so I thought, oh gosh, we made this film for everybody. I thought it was for lesbian women and, the LGBTQ community. But the thing about her is that she is the ultimate sort of underdog. Chavella Vargas was a lesbian. She was Latina. She was an artist. She was uneducated. She was, you don't get much or outside the margins than being a woman of color, queer woman of color artist, right? Poor artist in the 1940s. She's born in the 20s, but, coming of age in the 1940s. So like, that was a really rough time to be out, right? So anyway.
Absolutely.
Anyway, people identified with her. because everybody at some point has felt like an underdog. Everybody at some point has faced many, many challenges. And I think the other thing that people identified with is that, oh, she was an alcoholic. I forgot that part, you know, and she was an alcoholic. So she was just like, just pile it on, you know what I mean? But she made a comeback at the age of 72 from alcoholism. And she went on to win a Lifetime Grammy, to sell out Carnegie Hall, to be in the movie Frida with Salma Hayek, to have a like just soared after that, right? So I think people identify with that, right? So in terms of through line for that film was basically, it's never too late. That was the message that we wanted. We wanted to introduce people who didn't know her to her, and we wanted to inspire people and say, it's never too late. You know, look what she did. Chavella was literally lying in the gutter. That's how bad of an alcoholic she was. And she came back. So if she can do that, you could do whatever it is that's before you, right? Or you can at least take some juice from this to cheer you on to the next thing that you have to accomplish.
Ashley and I, we try to say life is long. You know, people always like to say life is short. It's like life is long and you can have iterations of life. Just live it to the fullest.
Do what you came here for.
Absolutely.
Live your purpose.
And it also reminds me of the saying, I believe it might have been Williamson's, where it says, when you let your light shine, you give other people's permission to shine their light as well.
Mm-hmm. I always remember that from Coach Carter. It was such a pivotal moment in the film when that was said. I don't know if either of you guys have seen that Samuel L. Jackson throwback.
It's a whole passage that is really good, and it's in Coach Carter and Aquila and the Bee, just so you know.
I forget about Aquila and the Bee sometimes.
It's from Marianne Williamson. She's had powerful work. You know, she did run for president at one point, but that piece, fire.
Can't take that away from her.
No, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of writing. Yeah.
So I think this next question fascinates me personally, just because I've studied Spanish and I studied in high school and college, and yet I'm still not fluent. So you worked on projects in both Spanish and English. What was that journey like? Did you study Spanish? Were you inspired to get into it and tackle it once you began working? What has that experience been like for you?
So I was an exchange student in Mexico City in high school. In my junior year of high school, I was abroad. And obviously that changed my life because I became fluent in Spanish. And it opened up doors to that world and those communities and people, and, you know, just made me a more cosmopolitan, open-minded person than I was before I went abroad. And I've spoken Spanish ever since. And my first job in Spanish was working at a social service organization when I came back from Mexico in the summer of my junior year, providing social services to migrant farmers. So I've been working in Spanish almost my whole life, right? So it's because I was 17. So ever since I was 17, I've been working in Spanish, and I didn't start working in Spanish media until I want to say about 2012, I started doing Spanish television. And
Telemundo specifically, or?
I worked for Telemundo. I also worked for Univision. I worked on, the first job was on The Voice in Spanish for children.
Nice.
La Voz Kids.
La Voz Kids.
La Voz Kids. So I worked on that, and then I worked on Top Chef Celebrity in Spanish, and I worked on Master Chef, and then Chavella. So those are the Spanish language projects that I've done. I love Spanish. I love being able to, I love, one of the things I love the most about Spanish is that it allows me to also understand French and Italian and a bit of Portuguese, because they're so close and I can read them, and you know what I mean? Like, so having that foundation has really been helpful in many ways.
I think I've come to appreciate and want to know Spanish even more living in Florida, the same way I have wanting to learn how to swim. You're just so surrounded by the culture and by the influence of it all. But I wish I had had the courage you had when I was younger to start doing like international travel. I feel like I was fearful when I was a kid and had these opportunities for like international trips. I've developed such an appetite for it as an adult, but I think it was so beautiful to hear that you went in your junior year and it really like blew up your mindset, right? And this exposure you got to have just gave you such valuable life experience. I love that.
Yeah, it was transformative. They say it will change your life. It did. It did.
I love that.
Yeah.
And traveling in general is a source of inspiration, right? Where you're able to get out of your everyday element or these four walls and realize the world doesn't revolve around you.
Right. Or the 5 friends and family members you spend the most time with. Yes.
Right. Well, not only that, but one of the things that happened to me when I went abroad was that I got to see, so I had some preconceived notions. Some were about Mexico and Mexicans, right?
Yeah.
Some were about Americans and our educational system, that we were the best and that we were, advanced and whatever we get fed. And I got there and realized that not only did we not have a really good educational system, but that our Mexican peers knew so much more about the world than we did. So much more about world history, so much more about world politics, so much more about what was happening in the world. And I learned that our media was curated and edited. And, and so for me, that was one of the biggest eye openers was these kids at 17, 18 were so much more sophisticated than their American counterparts because of this knowledge base that they had in the world. They, you know what I mean? And then this whole role of, American imperialism. I got to see American imperialism from the other side, right? Those frames, they reframed my view of the world.
Absolutely. It blows my mind that here in America, the idea of learning another language is so like, oh my goodness, learn English. But you go anywhere else in the world and they know 2 to 3 languages minimum. I'm like, what does that have? What does that tell you about our country and where we stand? And we're great at marketing. I think that's what our superpower is.
We're great at that and oppression.
There you go. You guys saying that just made me think like, oh, we're like the people who never leave our neighborhood. Like Americans are like, we're the country that doesn't leave the block, right?
Exactly.
But we think we know so much.
Know so much.
Exactly.
But it's like, I took French and I want to learn Spanish because these are our neighboring countries. Like, you know what I mean?
May we?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, that's bare minimum.
Exactly.
Anyway. Exactly.
That is the bare minimum. I took French as well.
Yes.
I'm not fluent in French, but I can understand it and I can speak. If I went some French speaking place, I could get by.
Yeah. And I could read it. I read it better than speaking. And so that's why I'm like, I need to learn more languages.
It's good for the brain.
I agree.
True. Yep.
It's good for the brain. It really stretches the brain and makes you because one of the other things I learned is that the way in which people conceive the world is informed by the way they speak about the world. So, the fact that in Spanish and the so-called romance languages, a lot of things are masculine and feminine. That's a perspective, right? And you don't really think about what that means, that for these people, the moon is female. Mm-hmm. Right. And the sun is masculine energy and just the sea is masculine, right? What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of how your brain interprets things?
Yeah.
It's a whole different lens, right?
For sure.
What is your unique talent and what sets you apart from your peers?
I think I have unique talents, but I don't know how unique they are because I think some of the things that I think are my talents, I think are universal and necessary to the field that I'm in. So, for example, I feel like I do great interviews. I'm a really good interviewer. And I think that's because I'm a really good listener. Right?
Mm.
And I'm very thoughtful and attentive and empathetic. And so when I'm doing an interview, I usually allot a minimum of an hour, usually more, right? Because I want to follow the conversation. And where you go, where you lead me, I'm going to go. Now I'm going to circle back to things that I want to make sure that I get answered, but it's not going to be like, and my next question. I mean, it's going to be a conversation, right? So I think that's a superpower, but I think a lot of filmmakers have that superpower because I think that's part of what attracts us to the work is that we like talking to people, we're interested in their stories, and if we don't know how to listen when we start off, at some point we either figure it out or we don't make great movies. So that's one of the things I consider a superpower. But like I said, I think it's necessary to the job. So I don't know how super it really is.
Well, it's garnered you success. So I would say it is a superpower for sure.
I say so. It's so engaging. I got a chance to see your short film and then Battlefield, Georgia. And they're just so well done. They're so well done. Thank you. They're engaging, they're informative. They have the heart of the people that are interviewed, and you can't get that off of like shallow conversation. So you do an excellent job at that.
I think my other superpower is grant writing.
That's real.
We funded Mama Bears with grants. It's not easy. It's a tedious process. It's slow. Like you write a grant, you don't hear back for months. Sometimes it's almost a year before you hear back. So you're waiting all that time and then you may not get the goddamn grant, right? But that experience, I said that I worked in all of the industry in New York, and being at that foundation has served me my entire life, my entire career. Because even after I got out of film school, the first thing I did was write a grant to make my movie, right? So that's a superpower that I have actually taught people, or consulted on people's grants proposals, because it's not something that comes naturally, and it's not something that a lot of people know how to do. They have to learn how to do it, So I think that's a superpower that is underestimated, undervalued perhaps, but not by filmmakers.
We may need to get some tips. There are some grants out there for podcasters that we need to be applying for.
Exactly.
So maybe circling back on that. But I wanted to ask you real quick, because I feel like we had this conversation before with somebody about just that process, that grind that so many people go to at the beginning of their career. Do you feel like younger creatives have to go through the same grind that you went through when you first started? Or do you think there are too many shortcuts these days?
I don't think there are too many shortcuts. There are shortcuts. Here's the thing about filmmaking. How do you learn how to make a good film? You make some bad ones and you show them to people. And then you get their reactions and you go, okay, really? No, that didn't make sense. That didn't make you laugh. That wasn't scary. That was, you know what I mean? That's how you learn. Because it's one of the few, if not the only medium where you to share it with other people in order to know what you have done.
Yeah.
What you've created, right? Because you don't know until you have that audience reaction. You need people to give you that. You need feedback from an audience in order to know if the film is working or not, which is why Hollywood does all those test runs, right? They have all those test screenings, because if they're not laughing and it's a comedy, you got a problem. If they're not jumping in their seats and it's a horror film, you got a problem. You haven't done your job, right? Now you got to go back and reshoot or re-edit or whatever it is. But that is one of the unique things about this particular business, is that it's collaborative in every way, from start to finish. Now you can make a movie by yourself. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know, but some people do, right? Especially like shorts and experimental films and stuff. But like this type of movie, a documentary like that, even if you're filming it and editing it yourself, you still need people. You still need the people to share their stories with you. You still need equipment. You still, you know what I mean? So that you still have a lot of needs. They do not have the same grind. And I'm glad for them that they don't have to do all the things that I did. But I don't think there's too many shortcuts unless they aren't served. But like, you know, you can make a film with your phone. They are making studio released films with phones.
Yep.
Right. I've seen a couple of them and they look great. So well, the first few were like shaky, janky, but now they're looking much better. So I ain't mad at the fact that you kids can pick up their phone and make a movie. I'm not mad at that. I think that's great. Because like I said, even still with this ability to do things very quickly, they still have to learn how to tell a good story. You don't get around that.
Build those relationships as well.
And build those skills and figure out what works and what doesn't, you know, and you still have to learn by doing. And so, yeah, they have a lot more shortcuts than we had. But that's like, you know, to me, it's like every parent wants their kid to have a better life than they had.
Yeah.
Right. So as a elder stateswoman, filmmaker, I want them to have an easier time. I want them to have shortcuts, you know?
Yeah. You're like, I broke some barriers so that you are able to do.
You wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
And it's hard enough. Even if they have all those shortcuts, it's still not easy.
You've spoken about funding and you've spoken about the fact that you had to do a lot of independent creative work, but you've also worked with a network, right? Like MSNBC. Do you have any preference at this point in your career?
I would like to work with a production company that gets work for me. The independent route is exhausting. And if I could continue to make movies without ever having to produce them again, that would be heaven. If I could have a producer work with me and raise the money so that I can just do the creative work, then that would be ideal. And I think so doing work for hire is very different from doing work for yourself because you have to answer to other people because it's their film. It's not your film, right? Now, it is your film because you're the filmmaker, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, 9 times out of 10, you got to answer to them. It's because they're paying you, because they hired you to deliver something and they have an agenda and they have an idea. So there are things I like about it and things I don't like about work for hire. But at the same time, the film that I won the Emmy for was a work for hire. So go figure. All right. But, you know, it's collaborative. So I feel like every project has its own path. And my job is just to show up and do the work.
Show up and do the work.
Ready to do the work.
What are some films that have impacted you and why?
So different films for different reasons. For a long time, I used to say one of my all-time favorite films was Harold and Maude, which is a narrative film about a young man who's suicidal and an old woman who's dying, and their friendship, their love affair. If you haven't seen it, look it up, Harold and Maude. It is a brilliant, beautiful film. Very quirky, very funny, ultimately very life-affirming. I also really love Being There with Peter Sellers, which is just a really funny, smart movie. But I really love comedies, and I just love movies, period. So the way I look at them is like, I got a favorite gangster movie, Godfather 2.
Yeah.
Right?
Really?
That moment when Michael Corleone looks at his wife and says, I'm going to let you ask me about my work. I never let you ask. I'm going to let you ask me this one time. She asked him and he fucking lies to her face. He just straight out lies to her face. That moment right there was transformative for me because I was a kid when that movie came out. And I thought that you could always tell when people lied.
These men. No,
that movie showed me otherwise. I was like, oh, oh shoot, oh no. So I love that movie for because it's a work of art, but also for that, right? Because it's opened my eyes and I was like, oh, okay, this is some other ish that I need to be aware of.
That is a takeaway I've never heard anybody say about the Godfather series.
Seriously,
And I
it's
love
usually
it.
the kiss of death. It's the horse in the bed.
It's regret. It's like the way that ate Michael alive, essentially, with the fact that he had to kill his brother and how he never got over it. You know, that's a huge theme about those familial ties. But yeah, the fact that you would watch it as a child and take away, oh, I can't trust these mofos.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I feel like movies are so instructive. I mean, there's so many movies that I love. Cinema Paradiso. What was the film about the guy in the concentration camp with his kid there, and he pretended like it was all play? Life is Beautiful. Such a beautiful film. I love Bergman films. I love Fellini. I loved the Spirit of the Beehive, this Carlos Saura film that came out when I was a kid. I love, what's that name? Lasse Hallström made. I loved it so much. My Life as a Dog. Oh my God. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Hilarious movie. I also like Lars and the Real Girl.
Okay, Ryan Gosling.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Benny and Joon. I like comedies, and I mean, I like all kinds of movies, but I really like movies that have a lot of heart and that have a lot of humor and that are that teach you something, right? That you learn something from. So those are a few of my favorite things.
I'm going to have to watch some of these films. I've seen some, but I have not seen all.
Yeah, well, I'm a lot older than you, so I've watched a lot of movies before you were born.
It's okay, though. We still pride ourselves on dipping back.
We do often. And that's why I was like, oh, man, I've heard of these, but I have not seen it. So, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I really loved American Beauty. You saw that, right?
Yeah.
That's an incredible movie.
I need to rewatch that as an adult, though, because I'm going through this cycle of rewatching certain things that, like, I know how they impacted me when I was like a teenager or younger. But as an adult, you look at things so like when me and Delora do throwbacks, we talk about it all the time. You see things so much differently in different phases of life.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's one I need to revisit.
Exactly.
There's two that I want to revisit that have always been favorites of mine. It is Braveheart and The Joy Luck Club, especially about the story of womanhood, like just to see it now that I'm a grown woman versus when I saw it when I was so young.
I think it may be on Amazon or Hulu. I feel like I saw it pop up recently.
It's on Hulu now.
Okay.
It became available this year because I always try to keep an eye out on some of these movies. And that one was gut wrenching. And I, again, knew nothing when I first saw that movie.
And learned a few things.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I didn't name any Black movies. Let me think about Black movies that I love. Ganja and Hess. That movie is amazing. Quilombo. I love. That's a Brazilian film about a Black Orpheus. Love that film. So Quilombo is about a Maroon group in Brazil when the Portuguese were invading Brazil, fighting, because that's what they called the Maroon Societies, Quilombos. Great movie. I really like Sweetback's Badass Song. Do you know that one?
Nope, haven't heard of this. We're going to have to release a list with your episode of all of your favorite films in case you want to catch them.
I feel like you should teach a class.
I did.
Well, there you go.
Exactly.
Song. Check that out. That's Mario Van Peebles. His dad, Melvin Van Peebles, made that.
Very cool.
Very nice. Speaking of films, film directors, who's on your Mount Rushmore of film directors or filmmakers?
Ava DuVernay is on my Mount Rushmore, not for her work, but for her. I love a lot of her work. Let me say that off the bat. But what she's done within the industry, and the way that on Queen Sugar, she brought so many women into the industry. She will always have a place in my heart, and she will always have a place on my Mount Rushmore, because that's some badass shit she did. And I got nothing but respect for her. And I, never hear a bad word about her from anybody. And I hear that she's amazing to work with. So she's up there. Let's see, who else? Martin Scorsese. Love him. Love his movies.
Do you find his work to be a bit indulgent, some of his later work?
Yeah, but still, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
Even though it's indulgent, it's brilliant.
He said, I found my sweet spot. So here you go.
Yeah, he's amazing. Let's see, as directors, who else do I love? What's on my Mount Rushmore? When you ask me these kind of questions, my brain goes like flat, just flatline. I can't think of any directors. I can't think of any movies. I can't think of anything. I'm just like, hummina. But and that's not to say that there aren't a lot of directors that I respect who would be on that wall, on that mountain. But I'd have to think some more about who they would be. I'll get back to you.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, if we have it before we post this episode, we'll put it in the notes as well. So you guys will have her movie list and her filmmaking Mount Rushmore list. So we only have one more question for you today, and that is, you've given some gems throughout the conversation, but what advice do you have for aspiring creatives who are hoping to follow along in your footsteps?
Well, first of all, I don't, that saying about following in somebody's footsteps, you walk in your own path. We're all walking our own path. So maybe you stand on people's shoulders, but you don't need to walk in my footsteps. Just do your thing, The most important thing, I think, for, well, not just documentary filmmakers, just storytellers in general, is that you need to pick stories, or let the stories pick you, that for which you have undying passion. The stories that move you to tears, that you must do, that you simply must do, that you are called to, that it's a mission, that you're driven, right? Because, and I say that because this industry is so challenging and so hard, especially in the documentary field, that if you don't have that kind of passion for the project, you may not be able to see it through. You may be more easily discouraged. But there's something about when you feel compelled to tell a story that makes you keep coming back and 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 finding a different way and finding a different kind of money, or a different way to fundraise, or a different way to shoot, right? It forces you to think outside the box and move and maneuver and manipulate and just come up with ways to get that project made, to get that film made, right? And so that's my strongest advice, is find stories that move you to your core. And those are the stories that you were meant to tell.
Amen. I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's, especially when you talked about how much of a labor of love, which I think as audience, because we do this podcast because we are such lovers of content that filmmakers such as yourself are creating for us, right? I think we respect and understand the hard work that goes into it, but you still don't know unless you're really, really, really behind that camera doing the work, right? Like, so I think I just have such a respect and appreciation and a love for all of you guys who are in this industry and create the thing that we get to sit back and watch and talk about and enjoy. So yeah, I think I understand the fact that if you're not passionate about it, it probably won't get made, because it just seems like with any job, no matter how creative the pursuit may be, it's time away from other things you could be doing. And I just can't imagine the criticism side too. Like, if you guys have something that you've put 5 years of your life into and then it doesn't get a great reception. Wow. So yeah, you got to find, I guess I say all this to say, I'm sure you have to find internal validation, right? Like, you have to have this burning desire, because once it leaves you, it's no longer yours.
Yeah, well, once the film is made, it has its own life, It's interesting. My philosophy of filmmaking is this: stories pick us. We don't pick them. They pick us. I think of them as like birds in a tree. You walk by and they land on your shoulder and they start whispering and chattering in your ear, and they just will not leave you alone. They start following you, like they perch on your, they live on your shoulder. They move from the tree to your shoulder. Now they're just there. Blah, blah, blah. Tell me, you got to tell me. You got to tell my story. I'm the story you need to tell. I'm me, 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 me. All right. The story dictates the genre, what kind of story it is, how it wants to be told. And so for me, once the story is done and the film is out there in the world, it's now, and I make my movies with a purpose. Each film, like you asked me about the through line, each film has a mission. I didn't realize this until Mama Bears, that, I was mission driven, but every film has a purpose and a mission. Right? And so when I send it out into the world, it's like, okay, now go fulfill your mission, go do your thing. This is what you were made for, right? And then they take off. And they do things that you will never do. And they go places you can't go. Like what the moment I realized how true that was when Chavella was showing in 3 cities on the same day. And I'm like, oh, well, she's left me. She left me in the dust, right? Because what am I going to do? Nothing. I can't do, like that's not my job to be at every screening and to talk to, I did a lot with that film, but at a certain point, it just took off on its own. And that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to take off and have their own lives and fulfill their mission. One of the ways in which that helps me when I'm making a film is that in those moments, those really hard moments when we don't have the money, we've run out of money yet again, I call on the film. You want to be made? You want me to tell you? I have done everything. I have written every grant proposal. I have sent every email. I have had every phone call. I am through. It's on you. It's time for you to make a move. Make something happen. And it happened every time. Powerful. That's just me. That's my philosophy. Because I'm like, look, we need all hands on deck. I can't be doing this by myself. I need your help. Come on now.
Yeah.
And then the movie steps up. So everything has a spirit, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, I'm taking a beat just because I'm like, it's a very powerful notion, right? It's a very powerful conversation to be had about the power of the art and the messaging that you've been putting out into the world in your projects. So,
and the intention behind it. And to your point, the life it lives once you bring it to the world, it's valuable. It's part of the canon of art. And what you're doing is important. I was still struck by the part you said earlier in the interview about how when you were filming Mama Bears, you thought it was important to include a Black voice, a Black mother in that. And I'm just saying, it shows you how important it is to have women, Black women like yourself in the position of director, producer, being that leader so that all voices are heard.
Yeah, I could not make a film about Christianity and LGBTQ plus rights without including a Black family. Simply because, well, for many reasons, I'm a Black woman. I'm gonna make a movie about that and not speak to my own community, right?
Right.
But also because, as we all know, there's a lot of hypocrisy within the Black church, and where they will embrace an LGBTQ person in certain roles, they want them there. It's a don't ask, don't tell scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as long as you quiet and keep in the closet and you're not too flamboyant, everybody will know, but they just won't acknowledge it. It won't be recognized, right? Well, what does that do to the person who can't be recognized, who can't be acknowledged, right? So I wanted to address some of that by talking directly to my people, right? So I'm not going to make a film that's about something that's so close to my heart and not speaking to my own community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much of your story with us, with our listeners. So many gems you dropped in this episode, and it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you for your time, for your talents, for these lists that we will have to post out here for the people.
Thank you so much. It was a privilege to speak to you and your career and your work. You do excellent work, and I'm excited to share your story. So thank you.
thank you both. Thank you for your interest and thank you for what you're doing to spread our stories.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that's it for us. We'll get out of here. Please share this episode with everybody you know. We so appreciate it. We'll be back. But in the meantime, as always, be blessed.
Bye.